Welcome to our Sites for Existing Landscapes webinar. Thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate the interest that you have expressed. This is our introductory webinar. This is our opportunity to hear what you're looking for in terms of support, in terms of information, and we're really looking forward to moving towards certifying existing landscapes to sites. So we do have a full panel of speakers today. I'd like to introduce my colleagues, Danielle, Vijaya, and Angela. We're delighted that Megan Barnes is joining from LAF. She will be sharing more information on the Landscape Performance Series. This is a very relevant tool to our process. We do have a lot to cover in the call today, and Danielle is going to talk us through the agenda, but I would like to remind everyone to use the Q&A box or use the chat function if you need to get in touch. You are free to use the Q&A throughout the webinar, and we have saved time at the end for discussion. So we look forward to that piece. Danielle, I'd like to turn it right over to you to take us forward, please.
Thanks, Anna Grace, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to share this new opportunity for existing built landscapes. So for the agenda, we're going to start off with a brief sites update of where we are today, and then talk about why sites for existing landscapes, and then review the development process for this site's adaptation. Then we'll talk about a little bit of getting certified as an existing landscape, what that looks like in terms of the submission and certification process, what the pilot guidance is, and the resources that are available for this first iteration. And then we'll pass it over to Megan to really review and dig into the details of landscape performance and all the resources and examples that are available to you as part of this pilot step. So then we'll move on to some Q&A time and close out with some engagement opportunities. So I'd like to briefly start off with just reviewing the 4 sites goals that were established as part of the development of the current Sites B2 rating system, which many of you know applies primarily on the design and construction stage of a project. All these goals remain relevant for existing built landscapes. But focusing on that last goal here, to transform the market, this is where the site's developers understood that in order to effectively meet the other 3 goals, we must evaluate and at times redefine the process and practices in place, in addition to setting benchmarks. So this occurs at every stage, addressing design, construction, and maintenance practices. In other words, a change in the process is necessary in order to change the outcomes that are sustainable, resilient, and regenerative, and not to continue with developing the status quo. So this seems potentially obvious to many, but this was something that I wanted to highlight as an important component of the site's rating system. So sites was originally modeled after LEED, but focuses on sites with or without buildings, from parks to commercial headquarters, government facilities, university campuses, for example. There are some synergies between the 2 systems, and projects like these shown here have taken advantage of the dual certification. There are resources on our webpage for design and construction. But there are many development projects that just don't have a building on the site, like parks, or there's maybe no construction happening with buildings. So sites fills an important gap in the market, but also with its focus on ecosystem services and nature-based solutions. To date, 275 projects are participating with sites, of which 38% have achieved certification and pre-certification. For those that are not familiar with pre-certification, this is a recognition that focuses on projects in their planning phase and do not have to be constructed yet. And then certification currently is for new construction or major renovation. So this other opportunity now for existing built landscapes is looking at the next stage of operations and maintenance. So as you can see here, sites is applying to a wide variety of project types and regions, covering 40 US states in Washington, DC, and in 17 countries. Sites has been adopted into policy in the US, starting at the federal level in 2016 with the US General Services Administration. This pertains to land port of entries, federal courthouses, office buildings, and so on. And at the municipal level, we're also seeing cities like Atlanta and Austin in Texas Other cities in Illinois, Virginia, Wisconsin have also incorporated sites into their sustainability guidelines, and in some cases incorporated as part of their permitting process. So we're really excited to see that uptake as well. And this really occurs because of local champions that help make this happen, like Kevin Burke, Director of Design at the Atlanta Beltline. I really appreciate his quote here, as it conveys the need to design and develop projects thinking about both short and long-term benefits. And to ensure those long-term benefits, we want to encourage already built sites to manage with sustainable practices and policies, and also incentivize and reward landscape performance monitoring. Sites for existing landscapes will now be able to reward and celebrate this type of leadership, and also provide the public with more examples where we can learn from each other on what works and what doesn't, and to share the latest research and best practices. As climate change continues to accelerate, risks to our communities and ecosystems are intensifying. New construction has begun responding with safer designs, but what about existing building sites and parks and infrastructure? According to Architecture 2030, 2/3 of global building stock in 2040 has already been built. These buildings and the surrounding landscape must be made resilient to natural hazards like floods, wildfires, and more. And studies show that natural climate solutions can offer up to 37% of the mitigation needed between now and 2030 to keep global temperatures rise below 2 degrees Celsius. And as the most recent IPCC report has stated, urban nature as a solution to improve resilience is particularly important in cities, which are home to 55% of the world's population and expanding. And this is straining ecosystems and contributing to climate change. Cities are home to 80% of the global GDP, responsible for 70% of the CO2 emissions and 75% of natural resource consumption. So they're also increasingly vulnerable in the face of warming world. So fortunately, sites to date has been vital in laying the foundation for ecosystem services, these also natural climate solutions, ecosystem services to be protected as well as restored, and in highlighting the need for an integrative design approach that brings ecosystem service to the forefront of decision-making early on. However, there are many more landscapes that have already been built that seek the same goals that we can learn from, influence, and recognize as leaders. Landscape performance increases as relationships between soil, vegetation, and organisms mature over long periods of time, becoming more complex and interdependent. Sustainable site management will ensure that future conditions will yield high performance landscapes that provide ecosystem services. So while designing and constructing sustainable landscapes lays a very important foundation for site sustainability, site maintenance, land management, ongoing operations is where we can secure over the long term a focus of meeting those 4 original sites goals, adapting where needed based on the feedback of performance monitoring data. So based on this growing interest to certify existing landscapes and address this gap in the market, GBCI is now expanding its offerings to existing built landscapes. In spring of this year, we launched a call for expressions of interest, which many of you responded to. So participating projects will be evaluating their sustainable site management practices and monitoring, reporting the social, economic, environmental benefits using pilot guidance that is based on the current Sites V2 rating system as the first iteration. Projects can ultimately earn sites certification for their actions and leadership. The pilot experience will greatly inform the further refinement of a site adaptation for existing built landscapes as well. So at this point, we are seeking partners and projects to collaborate with us, either with built projects to test with, as well as with subject matter expertise. So now I'm going to pass it over to Vijaya to talk about the development process for this adaptation.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to provide a little bit more context on the process we'll be following for developing this adaptation of the sites rating system for existing landscapes. The first step, sorry, I just want to make sure the slides are advancing. Sorry, yeah. The first step was to develop an initial guidance for existing landscapes so they could apply the sites rating system to their projects. This involved reviewing the prerequisite and credit requirements and identifying what may be applicable or relevant as is, which credits may need modifications, or which credits may not be applicable at all. We went through this exercise and have developed an initial pilot guidance document, and we'll be talking about it more later in this presentation. The next step was to put the guidance document to use by real projects. So as Daniel mentioned, we did a call for interest and have received an overwhelming response and interest in this adaptation. This webinar is part of this second step, where we'll be sharing the pilot guidance document with you all who have expressed interest to use this guidance towards your existing projects. We will then look for feedback from you all, as well as any other subject matter experts or stakeholders who wish to weigh in on their experience using this guidance to work towards certification. We'll review what worked, didn't work, and make updates as needed. And finally, the last step would be to finalize everything based on the feedback that we receive and release a refined sites for existing landscape framework. Daniel will share the guidance document with you all, but I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of how we adapted the current rating system for existing landscapes. Note that our goal was not to create a brand new rating system from scratch, but to start with the current rating system and see how it may be modified or adapted to work for existing sites. So you'll see that in some sections, the credits remain as is. In some, we marked credits as not applicable, and in others, we added credits and points. Specifically, you'll notice that, in the difference between the sites for new construction versus this adaptation, that we added several more points to the performance monitoring section, as we felt that is the most relevant to existing landscapes. And we removed points from the site context or the material selection section, as they're more relevant for new construction sites. There are also several credits and prerequisites that have been replaced with policies, such as sustainable purchasing policy or sustainable construction policy, to capture the best practice operational practices at existing sites. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit trouble with advancing. Skip too fast. This is a snapshot of the scorecard. The total possible points is 175 points, which is reduced from the 200 points available for the new construction sites projects. As I mentioned earlier, this is primarily because we took out several credits that did not seem as relevant for existing projects. Although the total available points have changed, the tiers of certification levels remains the same as with the current rating system. There are several credits which require only policies to be developed and have a low barrier to achievement. So we wanted to balance that with credits that address performance to truly reflect sustainability of existing sites. Therefore, keeping the thresholds the same allows us to continue to provide more meaningful recognition to the existing sites projects, even with overall reduced point totals. We would appreciate your feedback as you all use the guidance, if this approach is working or not, and happy to make adjustments when we release the final version. With that, I will pass it on to my colleague, Angela.
Thank you, Vijaya. Hi, everyone. I will be covering the submission and certification process for the site's adaptation for existing landscapes. For those of you who may not know me, I assist projects with registration, review, and certification. If you're already familiar with our certification process, then this will likely be a bit of review for you with a couple new details here and there. So we'll start with the registration process. I'm going to kind of walk you through a mock process of what it would look like to start from the beginning. So the first thing you'll do is notify GBCI by emailing sites@gbci.org, communicating your intent to seek certification as an existing landscape. You would then supply us with your project name and our primary point of contact's information. Next, you can register your project on Sites Online by submitting a registration form with your general project information. These two steps may seem a little backwards, but the reason we're doing it this way is to give you the chance to use the promo code that we would provide for payment. And I'm going to speak on that in just a few slides. Next, you'll complete the registration fee via Sites Online. And lastly, once you sign the GBCI certification agreement and email it over to us, you've officially completed registration. So here is the pricing structure for the Sites for Existing Landscapes pilot. If you're familiar with our pricing, you'll see that the discount we offer for USGBC and ASLA membership does in fact carry over, as well as the discount for when registration and certification fees are paid combined. So in addition to these two discounts, GBCI is also offering a lowered rate on certification fees for the first 25 projects that register to participate with the Sites for Existing Landscapes pilot. And I'm going to go over the certification process in the next few slides, but this information will be available to you after the presentation. So once you've paid your registration fee and your certification fee, you could begin uploading documentation to your Dropbox folder. The review pathway you'll pursue will be consistent with a standard or combined review where a team submits all prerequisites and credits that the project is pursuing in the preliminary application. And then GBCI would respond with which credits were earned and which are pending. You would just be sure to let us know when you're ready to undergo preliminary review, and we will initiate the process. And I do also want to mention that we will not look at your documentation before you express that you are ready for review. Each review phase will take 20 to 25 business days for GBCI to complete. That timeline is purely on our end. That's just how long it takes our reviewers to complete a review. On your preliminary review report, you'll receive technical guidance and notes for what to include or change to achieve compliance in the final review. You'll have the option available to you to ask questions about the technical advice given on the preliminary report. And you can submit those questions to sites@gbci.org, and we can set up a call or respond via email to address them. Once you've compiled your final materials, you can submit again via Dropbox, notifying us when ready. And lastly, you can accept the results of your final review and celebrate. So this was a high-level look at the submission and certification process. It may differ slightly based on the individual project, but this is a good outline to get you started. Again, to start this process, just send an email to sites@gbci.org with your intent to pursue the site's adaptation for existing landscapes, and we will get things rolling. So I'm going to end my bet here and pass things over to Danielle.
Thanks, Angela. All right, so I'm going to review the pilot guidance. This is really kind of the meat of everything of the adaptation and the resources that are available for participating projects. But first, I want to just make sure everyone's clear on the eligibility that we're outlining. Of course, this is for existing built landscapes and outdoor spaces, not undergoing new construction or major renovation to an existing site. We do assume that there might be some site updates, and those are permitted. If for some reason you're not clear on what's a major renovation, what's an update, just contact us and we'll discuss that. We do want the project to be completed and operating for about a year minimum to really, shift it from the new construction element and to get some performance data. There are no size restrictions right now, but do contact us if you have a site that's over 100 acres. So we just make sure that it makes sense with the scale of the system. And all project types and locations can apply to participate. And lastly, it's not an eligibility, but this is a pilot of a site's adaptation draft. So we do want the project team to understand there's a willingness and interest to participate and provide feedback and work with us. So it's really an exciting time to be at the forefront of developing this site's adaptation. And so we look forward to working with teams. There'll be a lot more close communication with GBCI sites team. So before I jump into the pilot guidance, I did want to just reiterate there are the 10 sections of the rating system. And as Vijaya pointed out earlier, the first step of the process was analyzing what could carry over for existing landscapes, with the focus being on the current conditions of the site design, on operations, site management, performance monitoring. Many of the credits work well, while some have been modified to be more applicable. The only place where we removed credits was in section 1 because it pertained to, and it was the 3 credits that pertain to site selection, since an existing site is not really choosing a new site or doing some major development. And we did have a head start in the O&M phase, as the current system includes a section highlighting the need for sustainable maintenance, which starts at having someone from the maintenance field weighing in on the design for the current V2 rating system. So in the current rating version, these credits are viewed more as a plan and commitment for sustainable maintenance, since a project can get certified once construction is completed. However, for existing landscape approach, we can now view actual results, active management policies in reducing material disposal, reducing pollution, recycling, conserving energy, and using renewable energy, for example. Additionally, I wanted to point out section 9 is of the current rating system does include performance monitoring as a means to encourage more projects in the design phase to consider long-term monitoring. We do keep this credit. Here's a quick snapshot of this. And in the current rating system, again, this is the intent is to improve the body of knowledge on long-term sustainability by monitoring and documenting sustainable design practices to evaluate their performance over time. However, for this credit, it is about a plan or policy that this is happening. There's other aspects to this in terms of having proof of funding. An element of that is already funded, a fundraising plan, a communication planning. We keep this credit, but we build off of this credit into terms, as Vijaya pointed out, we have additional points in the performing aspects. So now for existing landscapes, there's more opportunities to get actual results of performance data to better understand how these designs are working. I did also want to point out, we do have a pilot credit that we released last year for those that are not familiar, accounting for carbon performance. This still applies to existing landscapes, and this is in response to the need to address climate change and better understand how landscapes contribute to carbon performance, whether they're sequestering carbon or reducing embodied and operational carbon. So this credit is about assessing at the base level that performance, but then also making improvements upon that. The more we can demonstrate the benefits of sustainable landscapes in different terms, particularly quantifying those benefits and their value, whether it's return on investment, return on communities, new term, then the more nature-based solutions will be prioritized and better funded, and another reason we're doing this. And Megan from LAF will dig deeper into relevant resources on this. So now I do want to jump into the pilot guidance we're providing to participating projects. Here's a snapshot of it. This sheet outlines all available credits, credit modifications, and credits that are not applicable for existing landscape projects. This sheet is intended to be referenced in conjunction with the Sites V2 reference guide, which outlines the guidelines and requirements of all credits. And we do provide free access to the V2 reference guide for participating projects. So to better illustrate this, I'm going to shift over to the actual Excel spreadsheet. There are 3 tabs at the bottom, and we will send this out after the call so you can take a closer look, but we did want to help you navigate through this so you better understand kind of what's available. The overview is, again, just providing what we're doing, how we're doing this, more detail on the certification process that Angela did cover already. We do have a pilot scorecard here for you that is interactive. You can enter in the points and it tallies that up to give you a better idea how you're performing. And then the pilot guidance is really the site's adaptation in more detail. And for this call, it's really mainly an introductory call to let you know what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. We do want to share this with you so you can take a closer look. But when you're looking at this, just notice this key up here. The Y is for credits that stay the same from the Sites V2 rating system. And the M means that it's been modified and to refer to column G, which is this column right here on how to document, and that you still might need to reference the reference guide. It'll say this in that column G. And then NA, which only appears a few places, is when it's not applicable. So every single credit is outlined on how to do that. Some of these, like what was brought up earlier, have been collapsed into, for the material section have been collapsed into a sustainable purchasing policy, because for existing landscapes, you're not purchasing as many new materials as you would be for a new construction project. So we did want to make note of this, that projects will continue to purchase, and having everything embedded in a policy will help with that for the long term. And then this is the same with construction policy. If you have future construction projects, you have something in place that guides a more sustainable construction approach. So that's why those are a lot less points, because they are policies. And then moving down, you'll see here are some new, make this a little bit bigger, new opportunities to monitor and report on site performance. And for now, we've left these really open-ended, because we do realize that this is new for a lot of teams, a lot of projects, and we do want to get a sampling of economic benefits, environmental benefits, social benefits, resilience, transportation. We have that carbon performance credit down here. And we do point to resources at the bottom of this page that are a combination of LAF and other places. And so this is really, we want to make it accessible and meaningful to you. So we want to start there and give you as many examples of how to achieve, how to monitor those benefits, and then let us know what works, what's the the best way to do this. If you have new ideas, let us know as well. But we do want to provide it as many resources and leave it a little bit open-ended on how you want to do this. And then at the bottom right here is innovation and exemplary performance. We do list several different credits that are applicable for innovation or exemplary performance. You can always recommend a new one that is not here if you think it's relevant. So, and it doesn't already exist in another credit. So just jumping back in. So again, this is, we'll send this out after, so you can take a closer look because it is a lot of information here. We are available to do a future webinar where we dig into each section if there is interest. So just jumping back into the presentation, I just want to summarize again, just in terms of what's changed. 15 of the 18 prerequisites have been modified. Those not modified are the stormwater credits, the water conservation prerequisite, and the plan for sustainable site maintenance. Approximately half of the V2 credits have not been modified. 3 credits have been removed. Section 1, I mentioned this earlier. A new credit has been introduced. It's considered a 1 credit, but it's offering up to 26 potential points to measure social, environmental, economic benefits. So a big uptick there. Section 5 and 7, materials and construction have been collapsed into policies. And then section 10 is additional opportunity for innovation, exemplary performance. We have created a submission form, knowing this is very new to many people. So this is a submission form that will that is for registered sites projects that are applying for certification as an existing landscape. They'll use this form to organize the submission process and to provide feedback also on the site's adaptation that we have so far, to help ensure that the final guidance is simple, meaningful, accessible, as well as data driven. So just to jump in that form really quick. Again, there are many tabs down here. Don't be overwhelmed by that. It's the main part. First, this README first is just an overview of how to prepare and submit for your certification applications, some reminders, and also all the tabs are explained right here what they are. Project data summary, if you've done already a certified project, this is just basic information that we want to collect from projects. And this is something that should be consistently used in other documentation where it's relevant, like site users or the VSPZ area. The submission narrative files, this is really the main part of where you can consolidate all of your narratives for the credits, all the files that are associated with that, you would include that here. And so it's a great place for a team to just assemble all of that. It's also helpful for reviewers to see it all in one place. As Angela had pointed out, there's 2 stages of a review process. There's a preliminary and a final. And after you do a preliminary review, we provide technical guidance on anything that's pending that hasn't been earned. And when you resubmit for the final, you can update a narrative here to describe anything that wasn't clear in the first review, as well as upload any other documentation for that final review. And we do also want to ask projects that are not pursuing a credit, or along the way, if they just thought this wasn't clear, or this isn't relevant to my project, or the reason I didn't pursue this is because of this, to let us know in this format as well, because that'll help us with the final iteration. So hopefully that's clear. These next 3 tabs are really just more of a checklist for you to make sure that you've included all the things that you want to include in for your sustainable purchasing policy, because it does cover different credits in the system. So it's noted in that pilot guidance document, but we wanted to have you provide just a quick checklist for you to kind of know where to go. And then that's the same thing for the construction policy as well, and the sustainable maintenance checklist. And then this last tab is really, again, the same examples of potential innovation credits that you can use from LEED or from the pilot credits. You can also propose an innovation that is not here or in the current rating system. In addition to that, we are going to provide access to a pilot resources online resource, and this is a snapshot of the different topics. And this will be a go-to place for participating projects to learn about any updates. Again, tips on how to get started, preparing for a review, and all the different parts of the certification process, as well as the pilot resources, the reference guide, the pilot guidance, the submission form, and then also a place to ask questions. In order to share that information that other projects have asked, we're going to also post frequently asked questions, or all the questions per credit, on this page as well. So you can also look there first before asking a question to see if it's already been asked, and then just ways to stay updated and involved. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Megan, who will dig deeper into landscape performance series.
Thank you, Danielle. So we at LAF are really excited to see this effort. It's great to see the promotion of certification for all of those sites that are already out there. We know that sometimes taking on evaluating these things can be really daunting to practitioners. So luckily, LAF we've been here about over 10 years now doing this work. So I do want to share some of the resources we put together to help support you. And then of course, on the other side, we hope you'll consider participating with LAF to help build the body of knowledge like Danielle talked about. You know, you can pursue your site's existing certification and then also help build body of knowledge by connecting all those things together. So really great to see. Also great to see a lot of you on the webinar today that have participated with LAF. So yeah, so just very quickly, if you're not familiar with who we are, we're a nonprofit based in DC. Our mission is an environmental mission, but we believe that landscape architects are well equipped to achieve our environmental mission. And we invest in research scholarships and leadership programs to support the discipline. But what I'm here to talk about today really quickly, I don't want to take too much time, is landscape performance. So LAF got interested in landscape performance, like I said, a little over 10 years ago. And the way that we define landscape performance is a measure of the effectiveness with which landscape solutions fulfill their intended purpose and contribute to sustainability. And there we are hoping that their intended purpose often is contributing to sustainability. We're definitely interested in projects with environmental, social, and economic performance. And so we've made it our business to help designers and site managers, clients, communities evaluate that progress toward those goals. So we've developed a series of resources. And the primary one that many of you may have heard about is the Landscape Performance Series. So this is an online platform and a set of associated initiatives that really focus on these measurable impacts. This is a great go-to place to accompany your site's journey. So should you decide to look at certifying an existing landscape, it complements rating systems very well. And so I wanted to just say a few words about that. You know, CITES asks you to design for environmental, social, and economic performance. What our resources do are help you measure it, which is especially relevant with existing construction certification. CITES requires you to set those goals. We help you understand your progress toward them. CITES requires you to collect baseline data. We help you use that to evaluate performance. And of course, creating a monitoring plan is an important credit in CITES, and we provide the resources to help do that. So basically, we have a series of resources. Probably the most popular are our case study briefs, but we also have fast facts, the benefits toolkit, and collections. And I'm not going to go into details on all of these. Please, I encourage you to, if you have not, go on, check out the site and look around. But for now, I just wanted to give a very brief overview. Sorry about that. Brief overview of those key aspects. So the benefits toolkit is especially useful if you don't see yourself able to spend a lot of time out on a site collecting field data, for example. It's a whole set of applications, tools, calculators that allow you to estimate landscape performance in various categories. So environmental, social, and economic. We have some protocols for site observation, so observing how people use your site. We have ones related to biodiversity, habitat quality, carbon, lots of good stuff that you'll see in the benefits toolkit. Now, the Fast Fact Library may not be as relevant to the pursuit of CITES credits, but also nevertheless really important. It's a searchable collection of landscape performance or landscape benefits that are derived from published research. So as a practitioner, you don't often sit back and read your journal like a medical professional might do. So this just takes published research and tries to get into the hands of practitioners to make best use of it. And then finally, our other really centerpiece content that will be useful as a reference is a database of, actually, we're approaching 200 projects once we get up to date with publication, all exemplary built projects that have quantified environmental, social, and economic benefits. And this will be a really important sort of example for you all. And the case studies can be used kind of as a precedent study, but most importantly, they can help you explore and importantly, replicate for your own site specific landscape performance evaluation methods and metrics. They can help show what types of performance targets are reasonable, but for you all looking at existing projects, that's actually how we evaluated these projects. They were all evaluated after, and actually when they had been in operation for at least a year, which is a similar criteria for sites. So it looks like what we typically do to showcase for a case study, obviously, is just that visual impact of the before and after first. And then we have a lot of other case study sections, but the really unique piece that will be useful are our landscape performance benefits, which are really unique to LAF's case study. We break them down by environmental, social, and economic in various different categories underneath each one. And you can see that these are quantified benefits of the landscape. And the really important thing to know here is that each case study has this download methods button. So if you click on that button, you can view all of the methods, limitations, calculations, how these benefits were contrived. So how did they measure them? And you're going to be doing a lot of thinking about that for this process. And by looking at similar project typologies, similar benefits that you're interested in, you can really get down and see some examples that are pretty easily replicable. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. And of course, we have other case study sections, which I won't go over. So I just wanted to give a couple examples, and these are all CITES projects, and they, I think, really are a great example of a small selection of the types of benefits that you can come up with. So this one's kind of the gold standard. The Fifth Center for Sustainable Landscapes, this was the billed as the most sustainable building in the world, and the landscape really had to accompany that and hold up that standard. So it has some really powerful environmental benefits. Again, this is just a sample. There's a lot more benefits for all of these, but just to give you an idea of the types of things that a lot of these were actually sort of quantified and come up with as part of site certification as well. So obviously any of these projects is a great example. This project is Orange Mall Green Infrastructure Project. A lot of benefits that really and credits that really relate to an arid climate, making sure it is, it's a campus area for students, so making sure it's comfortable for students. Another project, West Point Foundry Preserve. So this is more of a natural area. Used in this team, the research team that did this, really took a lot of sites documentation to come up with these benefits. And I'll talk very briefly about how we do these, but again, the sites process was huge to informing this one in particular. Canal Park here in DC is really all about the social benefits. So a lot of sort of observation of, excuse me, a lot of observation of local residents. It was really built to try to accommodate the local community. So significant focus on that. And then UT Dallas, this is a good example of looking at kind of a project's goals. And, the UT Dallas formerly was a commuter campus. There wasn't a lot of awareness of its physical presence. And so this major investment in landscape to create this central campus area and kind of some offshoots of that really did function to the university's benefit. So those benefits, again, really speak to that. And then finally, Blue Hole Regional Park is a great project with a tricky charge. They had to protect this beloved swimming hole that was really becoming quite degraded, while at the same time accommodating huge numbers of visitors. And so you'll see, they tripled annual visitation. That's significant because they actually didn't charge entry fee revenue prior to the renovation of the park, but still, again, tripled the visitation while preserving the ecological integrity of the site. So again, all examples of the types of information that really could support your case for the certification. And I wanted to end with this one. It's not a site certified project, but this one is unique because the measuring for this project of the benefits was conducted completely by a small firm who basically just used the landscape performance series as a reference to evaluate it. So this is a gray to green schoolyard project. It was entirely asphalt before, and they put in a lot of plantings, a lot more active elements. And it was really in a dense residential urban neighborhood. So they were really worried about being good neighbors, reducing those service temperatures for kids to be able to use it, and then increasing community use because there are tons of residents around this area. And again, these are pretty powerful benefits for a green schoolyard. And again, they didn't take a lot of investment or time from the firm, but again, they are defensible and again, quite powerful. So ultimately, we have the landscape performance series, and then one last resource that I really want to recommend for your process is our guidebook. This is a PDF download. It's free to download on the landscape performance series in the upper right-hand corner of the website. You'll find it, and it really focuses on laying out all of those landscape performance metrics in those environmental, social, and economic categories, and they were really selected very intentionally to be easy to use, even if you're not an expert, generally applicable to different project typologies and locations, useful in a short time frame. A 7-year longitudinal study of your site might be the best way to evaluate it, but that's not going to happen, right, usually. And defensible. So, they're based on methods that are tested and tried, which is what we have taken on as LAF. So we recommend methods that have been tested by others. So again, all these different categories very much sort of correlating with sites categories in whatever benefits you might be interested in evaluating. Each page has sort of, I love the magic green box. That's really the important box that gives you an idea of all the different ways that you could quantify a benefit, for example, like stormwater management. We also provide worksheets. You can work through all of this and work through the process as well. So finally, that's the landscape performance series. I really think it's a beautiful match for this project. So I really appreciate the chance to share a little bit with you. Feel free to reach out. We have programs, we have resources. So again, don't be afraid to get engaged because these processes really dovetail beautifully together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna Grace for the Q&A.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing these additional resources, the guidebook and the case studies. I think they're going to be very relevant for these project teams as they go forward. I would ask all of our presenters to turn on their cameras now. We are going to move to Q&A. There may be some questions that require more discussion afterwards. We look forward to following up with you individually if we can't get to all of them today. Before we move to Q&A, Danielle, may I ask you to say a quick word, a little more about LAF?
Yes, I just wanted to really thank Megan for joining us today. LAF is really pioneering and the expert in landscape performance, and we're really excited to have them working with us on this. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to really work together with LAF and other stakeholders to really meet these goals that we're trying to reach. So thank you, Megan, again for joining us.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that. So I actually would like to begin with the very first question. We came earlier in the process. I think, Angela, I'm going to toss this one right to you. The first question was, is the information that we've already submitted in the expression for interest form considered a registration process, or do we start over?
Yeah, I'm going to leave my camera off. I hope that's okay. Can you let me know if my audio is coming through okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so thanks for your question. We use the expression of interest form as an informal way to just kind of gauge interest, not necessarily to lock individuals or projects into participating with the existing landscapes pilot. Once you do have a project interested in pursuing this adaptation, you would proceed through the formal registration steps that I outlined, which will again be provided after the webinar for review. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay, Angela, thank you. Yeah, and I just want to add to that. The main thing is you can just email sites@gbci.org. It'll connect with Angela and I and others on the sites team. Just let us know your intent to register. And then again, for the first 25 projects, we do provide a good discount for participating.
Thank you. I'm going to stick with the next process related question. How do you recommend a team get started on this process? That's a good next question. How shall we get started? Next steps.
I'll touch on that. If anyone else wants to tag on, please do. So once we provide the pilot guidance document, I would definitely look at that closely with your team and project owner. Make sure that you meet those eligibility requirements that I'd outlined earlier. And then after that, it's really about defining a project boundary and the land area for the site's participating project. And you'll want to look at the physical as well as temporal boundary for the existing landscape. And then looking at the pilot scorecard is a really great way to get an overarching view of what credits apply to your project. Also compare it to the existing project goals that are happening, and then where you can enhance. Also, I recommend reviewing the prerequisites in detail to ensure that eligibility. That is a baseline. We have modified some of those, so do take a look at the pilot guidance document. And with anything, just contact GBCI if you have any questions about eligibility or your boundary or anything in the pilot guidance as well.
Thank you, Danielle. Our next question is, can you elaborate upon how we are able to get 26 points, up to 26 points in the education section?
Sure, I'll touch on that. So there are, I have to look at the scorecard again. I can pull it up if that helps. So the 26 points were additional points with the, hold on one second, in the education section. So it actually has more than that. So let me go to the scorecard. if can see right here, monitoring, this is credit 9.4. It's a new one that we added, and it's up to 26 points. And this is pertaining to monitoring and reporting site performance. This is the additional points that we added to this adaptation. So if you scroll down to the pilot guidance, to that section, there are numerous ways, and we've given them points based on different opportunities from monitoring reporting site performance, whether it's economic benefits, environmental benefits, social benefits, resilience, transportation, carbon performance. You can also propose something that we don't have here. We're really open to working with you on what is accessible and meaningful for you. And so you would look at the resources at the bottom of this page. This is what Megan has reviewed as a place to start in terms of how to measure for an economic benefit or environmental benefit or social benefit, and taking a look at the different opportunities there of how to do that. And so if you get all of these points, you can get up to 26 points there. Again, this is out of the scorecard here just for this one section, one credit. So this whole section has gone up to 36 points total. These first three are just originally already in the rating system. And yeah, there's numerous other places to get. There's 175 potential points. And at the base level, it's 70 points to get certified.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm going to ask questions that have come through the chat as well. They're a little hard for me to find, but I want to make sure I don't miss them. How does existing sites deal with different regions of the country? I presume this is a US question.
Similar to Sites V2, it's taken into account in terms of the performance-based metrics or the plans and policies. So these are, there's some where we actually had to calibrate to the local area. The biomass credit will look at certain regions. So when you're improving upon your biomass, you're not making a desert look like a jungle. it's calibrated to the region. So these are all kind of embedded into the metrics. And I want to add to that, actually, if you do see something that is specific to your region, but not covered here at all, to let us know, and maybe you can propose something. I know what's come up before is managing snow and ice. Doesn't occur in other places like in the desert, but it does in many northern states in the US, at least, in other parts of the world. So if there's an approach there that you want to propose, let us know about that.
Thanks, Danielle. The next question is, can existing site certifications be submitted by owners or either by owners or practitioners? And can you give an idea of what level of effort is required from the maintenance teams? Is that a longer discussion one?
No, I'll go in. Project teams it can be the facility manager, the team, the project owner. They can submit for certification. It doesn't have to be the design team that's involved because it is later on, but it is good to have, some relationship, but not necessary. And so really anyone can submit their own project for certification as an existing landscape. And level of effort is a good question, and it's something we will be tracking. We don't know right now, but that's the kind of feedback that we do want to hear from you is level of effort.
Thanks. And Megan was answering a question in the Q&A too, and I'm actually not entirely certain if everyone can see this, so I want to read the question out loud for everyone. It's that one of our attendees mentioned that they have been working with sites before and could find the tag function in the fast fact library. So the question is really, is the tag still there or am I missing something? So Megan's response was just about website hiccups, I think. And we're going to look into it. And I think we've saved the question here. We can hopefully get back to you and get that working again. Thank you, Megan. Okay. Danielle, I have another question, but it came in through a different avenue. Okay. What is the support that GBCI will provide during the pilot process?
I can jump in on this one.
So yeah, so this is kind of a recurring theme throughout this webinar, is that first and most importantly, we're looking to approach this site's adaptation as more of a collaborative effort. We're open to feedback from participating projects, meeting you where you're at and working with you to get where you want to be. We also do offer, and I briefly touched on this, pre and post review calls to address your technical questions and your compliance strategies, because we recognize sometimes it can be helpful to talk through an issue face-to-face rather than over messaging. And we also have a ton, and this may be thinking far in advance, but we have a ton of resources and support available for marketing your certified project, getting your project out there and getting it the recognition that it deserves. So it's just a few things, the support that we offer. I don't know if Danielle wants to add anything else.
I also just wanted to quickly add the resource that Danielle mentioned. There is a website which will have all the resources, and a place where you can ask questions and everything. So we'll share the link to that resource after this call with you all as well. So that's an additional resource.
Thanks, Vijaya. We are getting very close to the top of the hour, and I want to allow an opportunity for Danielle to close us out. I will mention briefly that there are a couple of questions in the chat specific to traditional plant selection or regenerative urban agriculture. And I don't know, Danielle, if you just want to mention sort of what the pathway is, the potential pathway for these questions, and then maybe we can just tie out the webinar. I'll read you one of them. The suggestion was to include regenerative urban agriculture as a new benchmark credit for existing sites. So that's something I think maybe that we can think about.
Yeah, thank you for that that comment, and we will take that into consideration and reach out if you have other information that you want to share. Thanks.
Yeah, and one quick thing I wanted to add, like if you see some, if there are strategies or things that you would like to be incorporated and which are not already addressed in the rating system, like we would encourage you to look at the, use the innovation category and potentially bring those strategies there. And then of course, this is the kind of feedback that we're looking for. So, during the pilot process, if you give us the feedback, we, take that under advisement, and then in the refined, final version, incorporate that feedback. But until then, like the innovation category would be a great starting point.
Thanks, Vijaya. It's 3 o'clock in my time zone, so why don't you close our webinar?
Thank you to all of the speakers for joining us today, and for all the attendees for your interest. I just want to quickly wrap up by emphasizing that, sites to us from its origins was developed as more than just a rating system. We view this as a means to build community professionals that are committed to really reach those global goals at the local level and facilitate regional and local action. So this is really, really about creating community that helps us reach these really urgent goals that we have. And there are different opportunities for that. There are becoming a sites AP if you don't have a project or a way to participate in the existing landscape, but still want to get involved, join this growing sites community here. As well as we have another way to get involved if you are a organization like a nonprofit, academic institution, government agency, design and consulting firm, or others like these shown here. We have a community partner program, and this is really those that are committed to creating meaningful, high performance outdoor spaces and supporting the goals of sites. It lays the foundation for an active community of users and practitioners and visionaries. So we do believe that it's through our combined efforts that positive change is made. Lastly, we do have some dates for our remaining sites community calls this year. If you haven't joined one, the next one's tomorrow, if you have time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And this will feature 2 leaders from 2 newly certified project teams in Montana and Maine. So you can register for this through our events page of our site's website. Again, feel free to contact us. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your week.